Hey everyone, it's Vaultbox. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome here if you are new. The panel you're about to watch is called cosplADHD, Tips, Tricks, and Stories of Cosplaying While Being Neurodivergent. And if you didn't know already, I was actually diagnosed with ADHD last year at the age of 34. I was diagnosed with combined type, so I'm both inattentive and hyperactive. And I've been talking about ADHD and how that impacts my cosplay hobby for a while now. And so at the last minute, I decided to submit this panel idea to PAX East, and it was accepted. So what you're about to watch is that panel that came from that very impulsive decision, and I guess there would have been no better way for me to make that decision to actually put myself out there and do a panel at PAX East than, you know, being impulsive. And as always, thank you so much to my Patreon supporters for your generous support of my work and of my channel, and if you would like to join them, you can head over to patreon.com/vaultbox. So now let's get on to the panel. Hi everyone, welcome to our panel on cosplay ADHD, tips, tricks, and stories of cosplaying while being neurodivergent. My name is Vaultfox, or I go by Vaultfox, my real name is Robin, and I am a cosplayer / educator, and I happen to have ADHD. And first, I want to thank everyone for coming out. I know that this was the first panel of the day. I really appreciate you guys, making the effort to come out here, hear what we want to talk about. There's some great cosplays out here. I know that I'm already going to get distracted just looking at them while I'm doing this. But also, thank you so much to PAX for scheduling this as the very first thing of the day, because then I won't have to sit around in waiting mode all day and just thinking about this panel and having to give it. So I don't know if you did that on purpose, but thank you so much, PAX. Again, I am Vaultfox. I am a cosplayer. I am also a YouTuber. I talk a little bit about how cosplay has impacted, my life, as well as how ADHD has impacted how I cosplay as a person. And now I'm going to hand it over to the rest of my lovely panelists, and starting down here with Jam.
Yeah, hey everybody, I'm Jamie. So I'm Jam the Jedi on all social media. So I'm a cosplayer, and I'm also a content creator for the podcast Holland Marauders. So we're a Star Wars podcast. Most of what I do is Star Wars, but today I'm a Misty from Cyberpunk 2077, because that's also my favorite game right now. So yeah, so just about me in general. So I have self-diagnosed ADHD and some crippling anxiety. So I really wanted to talk about that with everyone, because nothing about how the way I cosplay is normal. So the moment Robin was like, hey, I'm going to do a panel about this, I'm like, done. I'm ready. I'm there. So thank you guys for coming out, being here this morning.
Good morning, everybody. I am Mark. I am the Admiral MB on social media. And if you have pretty much been to any convention up and down the Eastern Seaboard, you have probably seen me in this outfit. I go with it everywhere. I am the doctor, essentially. And I was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. So I definitely want to share, my experience of what that was like and how cosplay really helped me with understanding, what my limits are and really what I can do in spite of all of that. So.
Awesome. Yeah. All right, it is my turn now. I'm Mystic Mint on social media. My Insta is up there, but you can also find me Twitter, TikTok, Twitch, all the good stuff. You can also just call me Sage. That's my name. That's where Mystic Mint comes from, because Sage is part of the Mint family. I'm a cosplayer. Next year will be my 10-year anniversary of cosplaying, and I have dyslexia, specifically a form of it that affects writing more so than reading. And I'm really excited to talk about kind of the other aspects of dyslexia that are maybe less so known than it's a reading and writing disorder, and how that's impacted my cosplay. Like Googling some stuff to be like, okay, what's actually a symptom of that again? And then relating that back to cosplay for this panel was actually really eye-opening, and it's like, oh, it makes so much sense. So I'm really excited to share that with all of you, and I'll hand it over to Andrew.
Hi everyone, my name is Andrew Harris. I'm a neurodivergent educator, therapist, and game designer. I'm not actually a cosplayer, I just dress like this daily. But I'm here because this is an area that I'm really interested in. The games that I make, I use them therapeutically to foster social emotional learning, connections, and things like that. The project that I've been working on for about 10 years is called the Guild Chronicles game. It's actually on Kickstarter. It got featured overnight, so I'm really, really excited. And I'll be demoing it downstairs if you all want to come by the Unpub area afterwards.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And yeah, whenever he was coming in here, I just had an enforcer say, "Do you know this man?" I'm like, "Yes, the man in the hat. Yes, he is allowed to come in here." So, and again, thank you guys so much for agreeing to be on this panel. So a little backstory on how this panel actually came about. Last year at last year's PAX East, I attended a panel called ADHD and D, and I really enjoyed that panel. And I got to thinking, like, a lot of these things kind of carry over into, cosplay and ADHD and neurodivergency. And I thought about it there, and then the idea just kind of went away. And then around, I want to say January, mid-January, whenever the panels were, you could submit to have a panel, I impulsively submitted it because that's what you do. And then after I did that, I was like, oh no, I need to have panelists. So I remember just tweeting and being like, hey, does anyone want to be on this? So again, thank you so much for doing that. And yeah, once it got accepted, I was like, okay, now I have to actually do the panel. I have to write it. But hey, I love talking about this kind of stuff. I think it's really important to discuss because, in my mind, there is, one of the things that I have issue with ADHD is a lot of the things that I do feel like they're not the right way to do things. But with cosplay, it's almost encouraged to do things the wrong way. And, everyone up here, and I'm sure everyone out in the crowd who's, done some sort of crafting or cosplay, we all have very different methods. So just one of those things that I thought would make for an interesting panel. But so some of the things that we're going to discuss today in this panel. So going to hopefully ease some of the overwhelm of, getting started in cosplay, because as fun, as exciting as it is to be like, oh my gosh, I get to be my own favorite character, once you start getting into it, you're like, how the heck do I do this? Because there's no rule book, It's not like getting into a board game or say like Warhammer, where you can just YouTube something saying, how do I start playing Warhammer 40K? How do I start cosplaying? Well, there's a whole different, a lot of ways you can do it, and we'll share how we all got into it. You kind of inspire you in that way. And we're also going to, validate and recognize those neurodivergent struggles, because there are quite a lot of them, as well as how we work through those specific struggles. And then also something that I really wanted to touch on was discussing the actual social side of cosplaying. So not necessarily social media, that's a whole other beast in itself, that's a whole other panel idea. But the social side of cosplay, like we're doing right now, like, cosplaying at conventions, cosplaying with friends and things like that, and how being neurodivergent affects that. And then we'll finish off by saying why we think it's worth it, why we think all of this stuff that we're going through is actually worth it at the end of the day to just be our favorite characters. So, and then one last thing is just a, disclaimer that, I 100% support self-diagnosis and all of that, but I do have to say that none of this panel should be taken as medical advice. No, I am not a medical professional, none of us are, except for I know that you...
Not quite.
Yes, you have credentials, but yes, again, so none of this is, medical advice or anything like that. So.
I am a doctor, though.
Yes, okay, other than the doctor, which I don't know how we got the doctor on this panel. Goodness. Alrighty, so let us get into the discussion. So, first question of cosplay, how do you start? So, this is the most common question that I get asked, and I swear I have a different answer for this every single time, because I am always tempted to say, I have no idea how to start, because truthfully, whenever I started cosplaying, I really didn't know how to start. Cosplay, again, is very overwhelming, especially for us neurodivergents. It's great. It's a great world to get into because there's just so many things you can do. But at the end of the day, there's so many things that you can do that you can't decide what to go with. So it's not like, it's not like asking how to get into a specific board game or things like that. There's just so many ways to go about doing it. And I always tell people, cosplay is a million hobbies masquerading as one in a trench coat. And there's so many different ways you can go about doing it. So, how I specifically got into cosplay, and I think sharing those types of stories kind of help people learn how to start. So I actually cosplayed for the first time at PAX East in 2015. So that is myself cosplaying as Star Fox in 2015 with my husband, who was Booker DeWitt. And it's just a closet cosplay. It's just, you know, you can't see it on my chest, but I do just have duct taped Fox on there. But I had a great time. I had so much fun. And so many people at the convention were like, oh my goodness, Star Fox, like, I love you so much. And so that really kicked me into gear for the next year in 2016, where my friend Teresa, who is here, and I'm going to blame her with getting me into all of this, suggested, hey, we're going to be going to PAX East, and, you know, Fallout 4 happened in Boston. So how about we all cosplay as Fallout characters? So I cosplayed as Piper Wright, and that was all a thrifted outfit. I think I painted, like, the collar and stuff, and it was... I don't want to say it was one of the easier costumes to get into because it was thrifted. I could kind of just mangle things, and they didn't have to look super pristine. So the way that I got into it was with really simple costumes like this. You know, like, I'll be honest, I'm not really like a big fan of Piper Wright, but making that costume, putting all that together really gave me the foundation of how to kind of, you know, gather costume products and, you know, use unconventional ways of getting them. Like, some of these were thrifted, some of these I got from eBay and things like that. And then 2022, you know, it's been, what is that, 2015 to 2022? Is that 7 years? So, you know, these things don't happen overnight. And I think we all understand that. And as much as you say, like, it doesn't happen overnight, you want it to happen overnight. You want to get to this point. But it's just something to remember. I wanted to put this slide up here just to be like, hey, we all start somewhere, you know, just one of those things. So, again, how do you start? So with that whole, what I just said there, I think it's best, and this is my personal opinion, to first decide on the character that you want to cosplay. It's a lot easier to go and Google something like, okay, I want to make some Bo-Katan armor, and you can punch that into YouTube, you can punch that into Google and get some types of, you know, tutorials on how to make that specific thing. So it really narrows down the field for you in that way. And for me, that helps so much because if I don't pick a character to cosplay, then I end up with just like, well, I still have like tons of costumes that are just not finished. But still, that's my personal way that I got into it and how I would suggest. But I want to ask you guys, like, how would you recommend someone get into the hobby that hasn't been in?
Do you want me to begin?
Yeah.
Okay. So the biggest, like, as you keep saying, how you start is just pick your character first. Like, always just pick, like, who speaks to you and who you like, and then figure out what you're comfortable doing. I got started doing a lot of Walking Dead cosplay, actually, because it was mostly thrifted materials, and you just make it look like crap, and it was perfect. And that was just the easiest way to, like, really get into it. And then as you, like, go from there, like, you find, like, communities along the way that, like, really connect with you, and sometimes you find a moment in which you want to move on from that community. That has happened, like, a few times as well from, like, different fandoms. But then also you find ones that, like, you really do connect with, and, like, those friends that you make that are really solid friendships. So yeah, like, my, like, backstory, I actually met Robin in 2015, 2016 when she was doing Fallout cosplay, because Fallout is, like, my other, like, all-time favorite thing in the universe aside from Star Wars. So, like, that's, like, it's still funny to be like, you're like, oh, I'm gonna be Piper, and I'm like, oh, I got you. But, like, it's always, the thrifting is, like, I can't speak highly of it enough, because even when you grow as a cosplayer, you're still gonna find things that, like, work for thrifting. Like, this sweater base was thrifted, and that's not something I thought I would have, like, done, like, previously, but I was like, I'm not gonna, like, knit a sweater. Like, you figure out, like, the tasks that you want to learn, and then the ones that you're like, you know what, that's not for me, and then you can, like, move on from there. Like, recently, like, I've been diving into 3D printing, and I have to shout out my friend Jack, who's been, like, helping us, like, put all that together. I want to throw the machine across the room every single time I look at it. It's not something I'm comfortable with yet. I know it's something in the future I'm going to learn, but, like, I think that the biggest thing is, how do you start? You're not going to be a pro overnight, and you're maybe never going to be a pro, but that's okay, because it's a hobby and it's for fun. And that's the biggest thing to always remember, is at the end of the day, this is just for fun. If it's stressing you out, don't do it. Just, like, take a step back and take a break. It's totally okay. So how do you start? Find your character, find out what you're comfortable doing and what you want to learn, and then just try and see what you can do. And then find your support along the way, because we'll get into more of that later, but like find your support along the way through friends and also through tutorials. I couldn't tell you the amount of times on a single project I've looked up how to do like highly specific like sewing like details, like, oh, how do you do like a double stitch? How do you do like a corner like fold? I don't even know what the terms are half the time. I just like vaguely search like what I want, and then I'm in like anime tutorials from like 2008, but I'm like, this is exactly what I needed. You never know what you're gonna find, but that also is part of the whole like rabbit hole if you're just doing all this like research along the way. Pick your character, figure out what you're comfortable with, and then you do your research, and then you go from there. That's how I go about it.
Awesome. Well, I definitely want to second a lot of what you said, because that speaks to my experience here. But to add, my own personal cosplay journey, my very first cosplay that I did at like any proper convention is this. It is the Sixth Doctor. This is it. This isn't the original coat, thankfully. I have replaced it over the years. But if I can impart, one piece of advice to everybody here is don't be afraid to go niche. If you have a niche fandom or a niche character that really speaks to you, don't be afraid to do that, because I know the temptation is always out there to be one of the crowd. And I have done that before, because that's when you and I met. I was in a vault suit for that 2016. Yeah, it was all Fallout. So, but this is my passion right here. I love Fallout, but this is my cosplay passion right here is this outfit, and this is a hodgepodge of various things like this coat. People ask me this all the time. Did you make the coat? I did not make the coat. I'm saying it here, all right, that I did not make the coat. But everything else I kind of like threw together, like this undercoat here. That's the only part of this that's actually British. I thrifted this. This is just ribbon from any arts and crafts store, and the only thing I actually really made was this undershirt, and that's ribbon, and a little bit of this. So, I'm no good at sewing. So, use the skills that you have, because you'd be surprised at what you're capable of. If something like, sewing is too much for you, go ahead and look for something online, because odds are it's the internet. There's going to be something out there, and cosplay is so big that odds are somebody makes what you're trying to get. And if you gotta, patch it along the way, do what is within your ability to do. Don't feel like you have to reach to make your first cosplay. Absolutely throw it together, because the first cosplays were all like handmade and everything. That's just where this whole thing came from.
Yeah, I mean, this flight suit, I purchased it because I was focusing on making the armor for this and my husband's Mandalorian, and I was like, I need help, so I'm going to purchase the flight suit. So, yeah, nothing wrong with that. Yeah, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I can go ahead, and I will also, I guess, kind of say how I got into cosplay, and then I definitely second a lot of those tips, but I have some other things I'll add. So I started cosplaying in 2014, I believe, and my first cosplay was Louise from Bob's Burgers, which is still one of my favorite shows to this day. Absolutely love Bob's Burgers. And we had been given like this random, it's like terrible green fabric, but I already had it, and I've been sewing since I was like a child because my mom taught me, and I went to a private school, and that was like part of our curriculum. So I'm like, I'm gonna hand sew the dress, and so I did. And I made her little hat, and I just like used my own hair instead of a wig, and wore it to Wizard World Portland, which is now Fan Expo. Portland, Oregon, I should say. I realize we're on the East Coast and
Love
Maine
Portland,
exists. I am originally from the West Coast. But I got into it after watching Heroes of Cosplay, which was a kind of like short-lived sci-fi show that Johan was on, and a bunch of other people, including a guy from Portland whose name I sadly don't remember. But it was a really great experience. A lot of people ended up like asking to take my photo, and I think that was part of why I decided to keep with it, was because of how nice everyone was. I haven't worn that cosplay since then, but I've like made a Tina cosplay since then, and I'd really love to remake Louise at some point because my sewing's definitely improved. So I think going off of that and kind of like what Admiral said is, what skills do you already have that could work towards a cosplay that you're thinking of? What materials do you already potentially have at home? I have so many cosplays that it's like, oh, I have a t-shirt that would be great for this character, so I'm just going to buy a wig and do like a casual cosplay. And I've made some really great friends that way. And that's super fun. That's probably what I'm going to do like Sunday for this con, be comfortable. But yeah, I'd say, you know, play into your skills. Thrifting is always an availability. Amazon, like these leggings are leggings I already owned, meshed together with some from Amazon. And also, don't be like afraid to commission people. There are so many talented cosplayers that take commissions and would love to hear from you. Like, I don't do wigs, that's not my thing. Luckily, this is not too complex a wig. So I would totally commission someone because there are wickedly talented people out there. So like, don't be afraid to rely on the community or to like ask questions. Like, if you see someone posting like their work in progress, be like, hey, could you explain a little more how exactly you did this? And they'll be like more than happy to. Twitter is a place that has a lot of like cosplay work in progress threads, which I think is a really great resource of just kind of seeing the way some people do stuff. I know I bookmark a lot of things because I'm like, I'm going to need that someday. So I'd highly recommend kind of like checking that out. And then as everyone said, once you have that character picked, it makes researching what skills you might want to learn or what materials you need way easier. Yeah, that's my tips.
So when I saw this question ahead of time, I was thinking a lot about like neurodivergence and like the executive dysfunction that often comes with that. And just the idea of like sitting down and physically starting is its own challenge in itself. If there's a task that I'm not good at, I'm likely to procrastinate on it, make up excuses, avoid it for a long time. And then it's always like 2 days before something's due and I'm rushing as fast as I can to get it done. So knowing that about yourself, so knowing like what challenges you have executively, knowing what things actually support you in that. Maybe it's having a friend that's holding you accountable, that you're working alongside a couple days a week. Maybe it's having schedules and alarms that go off that give you reminders and harass you until you actually do it. All of those things, when I just think about this intersection, I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind and also be forgiving of yourself for. Like, that's who we are. We're passionate. We do these things really, really well, but also it's going to be really hard to start sometimes.
Yes.
There will always be another con if you don't finish in time.
Yes. That is a great segue because that's our next question. No, really, how do you start? Because it's one thing to say you want to start cosplaying and you want to do this, but it's hard to start. You know, you get stuck. I personally get stuck in the planning phases of cosplays so long. Like, I know that I do it. I try to give myself grace, but I just love planning cosplays. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about. Like, what are our specific challenges whenever it comes to actually cosplaying with our specific neurodiversity? So again, I have ADHD. I have the combined presentation where it's hyperactive and inattentive. And like I said, I get very much into the planning process of these costumes. I just love it. I love doing all of that, you know, research and development. And I have a lot of I've taken a lot of strategies from my day job. I work in risk development, and I've also worked as a BSA in software development. And some of you in the room may know of something called Agile methodology. But essentially, there's something in Agile methodology called a Kanban board, which is just a bunch of, to-do lists. You kind of move them around into different silos, so you can actually take tasks that are within a certain, costume that you're building. So, for example, if I was making if I needed to make this piece of armor here, I would know that I needed to 3D print it. Well, I would need to first find like a model, then 3D print it, then paint it, sand it, all that kind of stuff. I'm paring it down a little bit just for time. But each of those tasks would have its own little note, or like its own little Post-it note. So I can then visualize the task and see it and be able to move it from, the in progress phase to it's done, or it gives a lot of movement and it just makes things more visual for me
Now, that's not to say that it works all the time, because sometimes I make this whole board and it just sits on my wall and it becomes clutter, you know? So that's whenever you have to just, I used to beat myself up about that because, and I actually did, it was about 2 months ago, I was getting ready to make a Kanban board for an Aloy cosplay that I'm working on from Horizon Zero Dawn. And I just did not want to make it. I was like, this is just too much work. I don't want to do it. So I just didn't. So I just started working on the costume, and it's been fine. And now I'm actually entering in the phase where I think I need to make the board to get myself on track. So again, just be gentle with yourself. Understand that, these strategies that we work, I can't remember the exact phrasing, but it's like, there's so many ADHD hacks, but the thing is they don't work for everyone, and that's okay. I mean, like, my own hacks don't work half the time for myself, and that's okay. So just being mindful of that. But yeah, do you want to discuss the challenges you face?
I mean, I think I'll start by saying I have a Google spreadsheet of every single time I get an idea for a cosplay, I just throw it in there. And then if I think about it again, I'll go back into the spreadsheet and be like, did I already put this in here? And then I'll like literally write a note and be like, all right, cool. There's like 300 cosplans in that spreadsheet. I just want that to be known. But it's kind of the point, like I've started like ranking them and whatnot, and I have like things that are actually in progress, things I'm working on for myself, things that I'm working on for my fiance. Like it's like that kind of thing where like I know I have a weird gauge on like what's going on with that. I've always really loved the fact that you use like the card method of like putting things in between. So like this is what's actually in progress. This is what's done. This is what I have to work on next. Like I love seeing all the neon green in Robin's stories. Like I always I like seeing it. I'm like, this is great. Yeah, look at it. Great. But like I kind of use like a similar method like as well. I at least like write like a bunch of lists of like what I'm working through currently, and I always try to limit myself to work on one costume at a time. Because if I don't, then I'll explode. It's serious, it's bad. I can't work on multiple costumes at once. And then sometimes like it is, like I'm working on one costume and it's just not working out. But like it's totally okay to just put everything away and just put it to the side. And if you want to revisit it eventually, that's totally fine. Are you guys familiar with the show Andor last year, the Star Wars show? The entire sequence when they're in prison with the jumpsuits? Okay, well, I tried to make one of those, and I got really way too in-depth of them, and I might also be the admin of a Facebook group of like 500 people about that costume. It all happened accidentally. But that costume's currently on hold for myself because I'm like, I can't look at this. It's just so much, but that's totally okay to just put something aside. Even if you do start the process, you get like a third of the way into it, and you're like, this isn't working out. It's okay. It's totally fine. So sometimes, how do you start? You just launch into it, and it's okay to take a step back if you're like, this is too much at the moment. I'm going to revisit it another time. Yeah.
Just remember, on program.
Oh my God, on program.
So I don't have anything as complex as your organization system, unfortunately. Mine is very bare bones. So one of the things that I like to do whenever I'm trying to plan out a new cosplay, which, shocker, I do have new cosplays. It's not the only thing I wear. There are other things in the closet. Is that, I use like the time where I'm like not focused the most, where I'm like, okay, I need a distraction. I don't want to do my taxes right now. So, you know what, I'm gonna look at some convention planning. And so that is when I am like hyperfixated. So I kind of harness that hyperfixation time, and I try and put that toward, okay, let's do a little bit of research here, but let's save everything because I'm gonna jump to something else in about 5 minutes. I'm going to go down a Wikipedia rabbit hole and discover how, you can get from Vin Diesel to World War II in like 5 clicks, stuff like that. So I'm always good about bookmarking. If I find, a piece for something online, I'm like, okay, I'm going to bookmark that. Etsy, I go a little prop hunting in there, favorite that. eBay to find myself, the infamous blue 6 Doctor jacket. I'm going to bookmark that for later. When I will get around to it, who knows? But, at least I have it, organized. I can come back to it when all of a sudden I have that epiphany. I'm like, oh, I wanted to do this.
Yep.
Maybe for this con.
Yep.
So, let's go back and check the notes, so to speak.
Yeah, I'm kind of like the opposite of I am not very organized in my planning. I am very much just jump in like kind of person, and then I'll backtrack if I need to. But I think as far as actually starting, picking something you enjoy to start with can be really helpful, of like, okay, which part of this cosplay am I going to make first? I'm going to make the part that, actually not very much of this is hand sewn, but let's say that some of it's hand sewn. I'm going to do that first because that's what I enjoy more than machine sewing. But then once it's started, then I'm like kind of in the groove of like, okay, well, if I want to make the whole outfit, I got to now go do the parts that maybe I enjoy less, but I've already gotten it going, so I kind of have that motivation. So I've found that to be helpful. I also tend to have multiple cosplays kind of going on at once, because I also find that like helpful with just the way my life is and my work schedule, of there's not really necessarily a lot of time where I have the energy to be like, okay, I'm gonna go figure out like what stitch I need to use, and I'm gonna go cut out like all this patterning and all this. So I can really only do that, you know, like maybe 1 or 2 days out of the week that I'm not like working the whole day. So then being able to jump around between projects and doing a step that it's like, okay, I can do this on the couch while I zone out to like shitty reality TV after work, I think is really helpful. So like kind of taking it at your own pace and what works best with your personal schedule, I've found to be really helpful, and I've definitely noticed a change in that because I started cosplaying when I was in 8th grade, and then I just graduated undergrad in June, and the amount of cosplays that I've made and the span of time in which I've made them has changed a lot throughout kind of all those life changes. So yeah, kind of adapting to what works best for you is really helpful for just getting started, and then also for continuing. So that's like what's worked for me, but as everyone's been saying, you kind of have to figure out what works for you, and you can definitely steal from like other aspects of your life of like, okay, if I like know I need to do grocery shopping, how do I go about that? Or like if I'm gonna do this other hobby, how do I go about making sure that gets done? And then just applying that to cosplay, because I feel like I've kind of done that of like adapting, like, okay, if I need to write an essay for school, I'm gonna like write a little bit now, but then do the research on a lighter day, and I do the same with cosplay. So yeah, those would be my tips for that.
I think for myself, I LARPed a lot when I was a teenager and in my 20s. And I always had these grand ambitions for making costumes. And I think the times that it was most successful, my friends and I would say, you know, we've got a long weekend coming up. Let's all get together. We'll have an art party. We'll just craft the whole weekend. If I can have like a group of other inspired, creative people around me, I'm a lot more productive. So for me, having that, even if we're not working on the same thing, having people to like turn and talk to, say what I'm excited about, or someone to ask a question if I'm stuck, they might have a new perspective that can get me out of that. So for me, I'm very social when I'm crafting, and I think the project I've been working on now, it's really accelerated once I brought real collaborators onto my team. So if you know that about yourself, finding those people, finding that community, it's a lot easier now with the internet and all these amazing groups that are out there. You don't even have to be in the same room. Just have someone that you can share your stuff with and hopefully keep the inspiration going.
Yeah. I have a Discord, cosplay Discord, and anytime I'm feeling like uninspired, I go into like the work in progress stuff, or like if someone needs help in one of the channels, and that always usually will like spark my creativity and get me back into the groove of everything. But yeah, really great points. We already covered that. And then, so we've talked a little bit about like the struggles and stuff, but I want to talk about how it's actually, you know, a good thing, and it has empowered us. So for me personally, it's going to sound cheesy, but it is literally like wearing armor. I am an introverted person, and you probably couldn't tell that by the fact that I'm like doing a panel and I have a YouTube channel and all this stuff. But for some reason, whenever I am cosplaying a character, or I don't even have the full getup on now, like the wig and everything, but it just gives me that barrier. It gives me that like, oh, okay, like this is what I'm here to do today. I am cosplaying as Bo-Katan. I am Bo-Katan. I can like take aspects of her and kind of channel them to be like, well, she would do this, you know, it's totally okay. And I feel like a lot of cosplayers kind of relate to that type of thing. Like, especially if you're cosplaying a character that's really important to you, you kind of start to take on a little bit of their characteristics, and it kind of even bleeds into, real life for me as well. Like, it even got to the point, like, it was about a week or so ago, I didn't know what I was going to wear to this convention because I just haven't been in the mood to wear costumes at the moment. And it feels weird being a cosplayer saying that, but sometimes you just put it on and you're like, you know what, I can do this. And the other thing that was really weird to me whenever I was not in the phase of wanting to wear a costume to this panel, I was like, I think I could sit up here as myself and do that. And I don't think I could have done that.
Yeah.
Like, maybe like even 5 years ago. It's just not something I'm comfortable with, but I was like, you know what, I can do it. And I really credit cosplay for getting me out of my shell and making myself like take chances and all that kind of stuff and putting myself out there. So that's how cosplay has empowered me. So if you want to go.
Excuse me. So I think that in general for me, for cosplay empowerment, a big thing, again, is it has like brought me out of my shell as well and just made me more interactive with the community. And just cosplay has opened so many doors for opening in, not just for like experiences, but just like making friends. In the past like handful of years alone, wildly during the pandemic time, I feel like my cosplay community, like friend group, has like exploded. And I think a lot of that was due to it just being online and just like chatting with people. But cosplay has really like empowered me to like just be more confident in myself and just more confident in my creations as well. And it's something that like you never know what you're actually going to be able to make yourself, but you never know until you try. And it helps as well, like when you have like a solid friend group or you're meeting like new people this way. Cosplay just has opened so many doors. Like that's like the biggest thing. And like you find like communities that like you like belong to as well. And I know that that's like always been like a really big difficulty, is just like the act of making friends. Especially like if you're never sure how to like share your thoughts with people, or you feel like you're just way too anxious to like approach others as well. Sometimes it's as simple as just like being like, hey, I love your costume. Can I get a photo with you? And maybe next year you're cosplaying from the same fandom and you're like, oh my God, hey, I remember you from last year. I was dressed as this, or I wasn't cosplaying, but I am now. And like getting to like have that experience and like reconnecting with people like over and over again, like is just really rewarding. And so feeling like you're part of a broader community is like a huge part that I think that cosplay has just like helps with so much.
Agreed.
Yeah, so it definitely has empowered me as well, because I was very much an introverted person, and now I'm much more of an extroverted introvert. So, we haven't quite shaken those introvert tendencies there. But in terms of my social interactions, cosplay has absolutely helped with that, because I was a very, shy child, essentially, and especially growing up, I was diagnosed as a child with autism spectrum disorder, so I've kind of known about this for a while, and I would shy away from introductions. I would shy away from talking to people who weren't family and everything, and then, cosplay just enabled me to really access this whole niche fandoms that I liked, Star Trek, Doctor Who, everything, and be able to go out there dressed as the character, and people are coming up to me and be like, hey, great costume, and talking. And, fast forward to now, I'm talking to a whole room full of people, and it's getting streamed on the internet, so it's very much an extroverted activity going on here. But I have met some of my closest friends through cosplay, and it very much just opened the door to what I'm capable of, essentially. It doesn't have to feel like I'm limited in some way.
Oh, it's me. You went first.
You're good.
The person in the middle is like throwing me off. Yeah, so how's cosplay empowered me? I think, like everyone else is saying, I am more on the introverted side. I saw like a reel recently. It was like the neurodivergent trait of being very introverted and not talking except for when someone approaches you at work, and then you're bubbly and outgoing for like 5 minutes. That's absolutely me at work, and me at cons and I know like everyone jokes about this, of like I feel like I'm an NPC of like, I will not approach you and say anything, but if you talk to me first, like I won't shut up. As you can tell from me talking now, if I'm given the outlet, I will go. So yeah, I think cosplay was kind of the start of that, looking back, of when I just felt more comfortable talking to strangers, whether it be like waiting in the grocery store line alone and talking to the cashier, like in high school, or just going from there. And just kind of the more and more that I did it, the same with like public speaking, from giving presentations in school and continuing to go to cons. I haven't done a panel in person in many years, but that was something I did a fair amount when I kind of first started, so it's actually really exciting to get back to that, so I'm really happy to be here. It's just cool. It's a really great way to meet people. I think also, other people had said, just seeing what you're capable of with it. Like, when I went to put this on today, I was like, damn, it's really cool that I made that. And it's kind of like inspiring for these future cosplays that I'm like, either I've like messed up a step up, or I have to like redo something and I'm feeling like down about it because it's not going the way I want. And then I look at something I've made in the past, I'm like, oh yeah, I am actually capable of making cool stuff. So I've found that to be really empowering.
I think when I think about cosplay, I think two real things kind of jump to mind. I think it was alluded to, but the idea that you can like inhabit a character and like channel that character. I think people are drawn to characters because they have traits that they might admire or that they might seek to have. And for whatever reason, and I'm the same way, if I'm imagining myself as that character, I can have those traits, and it slowly kind of crosses into my other parts of my life. I think a lot of my leadership skills, a lot of my confidence and stuff like that came through playing role-playing games. And I think this is kind of a really good parallel. I think walking around as this character, you can sort of feel like that character and have the confidence of that character, which I think is really cool. I also think it's just great to be able to be in a place where you can look around and see people like yourself. And like, if I'm walking down the street, I don't know if someone's into the same fandom as me, but I come here and like you're wearing it on your sleeve, like literally I can see it. And I see all of these amazing interactions with people who have never met each other before, seeing something that they are familiar with, that they admire, that they enjoy, and then connecting around it instantaneously. And I think that's one of the reasons these are such amazing things. Like, these conventions are so cool because you really do get to find your people. And I think this is just a great way to sort of say, this is who I am. I hope you want to talk to me. And if you don't, too bad, because it's who I am. I just love that about cosplay.
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, you become basically a walking billboard for whatever you are. You know, like whatever fandom you're participating in.
Here's my special interest.
True.
Yeah, here's my special interest.
Which is good and bad. So just
that
keep
kind of
it in
leads
check.
us into the next question. So tips for actually cosplaying at conventions and interacting with people in costume, because I know so PAX East in 2015 was my very first convention cosplaying at, and it didn't ruin me for conventions, but it was definitely, this is a very large convention. This is a lot of people. It could have easily overwhelmed me to the point that I didn't want to do it anymore. But so some of the things that I personally experience whenever I cosplay at conventions is, again, I'm an introverted person, but whenever I'm in cosplay, it's not necessarily that I'm forced to be social, but it's hard to walk in a set of armor down the street and people not say, hey, what are you doing? Or like, oh my God, Bo-Katan, love you. Or they'll say, oh, I hate you. You know, like people will say, they will see you as the character that you are. And that's just something you kind of have to get used to whenever you're cosplaying, especially whenever you're cosplaying a character like Bo-Katan that, so for the past 2 years before the new season came out, I was getting comments saying, oh, why are you holding that darksaber? That's not yours, and all that stuff. And I'm like, I'm gonna hold a darksaber. I have one, it's cool. But those were some of the things that whenever I started cosplaying, like they didn't like, you know, keep me from cosplaying, but it was just one of those things that whenever it happened, I wanted to make other people aware. It's like, you know, you love this character, and you know, there's going to be many people that love your character as well. However, it's going to happen. There will be the one person that's like, hey, don't like your character. What are you doing? And you kind of have to learn how to deal with that, and you kind of have to just brush it off, because that's all that they know, is that you are dressed up as that character. They don't know all of the time that you spent putting into that costume. And again, going back to being an introverted person, again, it forces you to be social. And so I know at the end of this day, I am going to be absolutely just destroyed mentally and physically, and I'm going to need some quiet time. I'm going to need, like, you know,
that's another thing at conventions, making sure you know where the AFK room is, or the sensory room, which is right back there, as I noticed. Just making sure that you have a plan of escape is not the right word, but if you're getting overwhelmed on like the show floor or just in general, just say the people you're around, be like, hey, I need to go take a break. I need to go to the bathroom, just get 5 minutes outside and take a break. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a lot to be in a costume, in a convention, surrounded by all of the stimuli, so don't beat yourself up for that. But that's one of my biggest tips, is just take care of yourself. You are in a costume and people are going to be interacting with you, but also don't discount yourself, and don't forget that you also have needs as well. So,
Yeah.
you wanna?
All of that. So, I mean, like the biggest thing, like yesterday, I was at PAX yesterday, and I wasn't cosplaying, but we were here the entire day, and we were also hosting a couple friends that had never been to PAX before, who were flying out that night to go to London. So we're like, hey, we want to do everything as possible with you guys today. And then after the convention ended, we're like, should we get dinner with you? But then my fiance and I are like, well, hey, actually, we're streaming Holland at Marauders later, so we should probably go home to like decompress. It was a wild like 2 hours of us just trying to decide, hey, what do we want to do? And we both have like bad decision paralysis when it comes to that, of just like, okay, we need to do this. We said goodbye to our friends. They went to the airport. We went home. So everything worked out. But like the biggest thing is always just know what your limits are, and it's going to be much lower than what you expect it to be, and that's okay. Like it's totally fine to like take those breaks, and like always have like your like emergency kit with you, essentially. So like I love how you use like the term like exit plan, but like that's like what it is. Like I have like a ready, just like, hey, I need to go outside, which is fine, just go. And like with like one of like my biggest pieces of advice as well, starting with cosplaying, is do a cosplay at a local convention, local to you, because it'll make you just much more comfortable in the first place. Like don't feel like you need to travel like across the country to go to a convention and cosplay at it. Because that's nuts, and I wanted to bring armor to Anaheim last year, but I didn't, and I'm really glad that I did not, because that would have been a nightmare. Yeah, so like that's like another big thing. Another thing that like I like work with personally is I'm a member of the Rebel Legion, so the Star Wars costuming group, and so we do a lot of events all the time. So I don't cosplay just at conventions, but I cosplay like all the time, everywhere, at places like at like the Bruins and whatnot, and then at like hospitals, and it's like, why are you wearing a costume? And you meet a lot of weird people, but you also meet a lot of awesome people.
Right.
And so like the best thing about that is like you have like biggest advice: surround yourself with people who support you and know what you're doing, and are like, yeah, that's cool. Or also surround yourself with people who will be like, hey, are you good? Do you need a second? Take a step back. And just remember to like say that back to them as well. Like even if they're not cosplaying, just be like, hey, are you good? Are you good? Yeah. Just if you have like that luxury to like surround yourself with people, or at least others, just be like, yeah, just quick check-in. You doing all right? And it helps so much.
Well, one of the circumstances of wearing a signature cosplay such as this to every convention that I go to is that people will, recognize me and be like, oh, hey, weren't you at this? Weren't you at that? And so all of a sudden, I'm bombarded by literal strangers saying, I saw you here, I saw you there. And I'm like, great. Inside. But on the outside, I kind of channel that just as like a fun example. I like to joke and say that, oh, you saw me at this convention. I've never been to that one, even though I have. And I just play it off as like, well, I'm a time traveler. And so I have not actually gone to that point in history. That's my future, your past. So that's kind of how I diffuse those awkward encounters. In fact, an enforcer came in right before we started and was like, hey, didn't I see you at Regia? Which was 2 months ago at the West End, and I was there, and so I'm like, okay, here we go.
He completely fooled me.
Yeah, I'm like, where is this con? I've never heard of this con. And then I'm like, well, I'm a time traveler, so maybe it hasn't happened yet. But the funny thing is, that person recognized me at the time. At a Regia, I was wearing a completely different cosplay, so it's like they didn't recognize the cosplay; they recognized the face.
Yeah.
So that's a new one.
Yeah, on the opposite end of that, you will oftentimes get people coming up and be like, I met you at like so-and-so con, or like I'll look at someone and be like, you look kind of familiar, because wigs and makeup and now masks.
Yep.
I have no idea who anyone is.
Yep.
So it's really helpful if you're very like specific of like, if you're reintroducing yourself to someone being like, oh, I saw you at this con whenever I was dressed as this, you were wearing that. That will probably help spark their memory. And then, yeah, going off of what everyone else kind of said is, yeah, making sure you're taking care of yourself. I've realized in going back to cons since COVID, my like willingness to be in a costume all day is not the same as when I was a teenager. But I think my FOMO also isn't as bad. Like I really had issues with like leaving the con floor early and just like going back to the hotel room or going home. Whereas like for today, I'm like, I'm probably not going to stay too late into the evening. I got like an hour of public transit to get home. I want to put my hoodie back on and disassociate on the bus. Like already looking forward to it. And as people were saying, you might encounter people that, you know, really don't like the character that you're cosplaying. I haven't really run into that, luckily. But yeah, I really just kind of have to just brush it off because they're the ones that are not doing interacting right. Obviously, you're dressed as them. You put a lot of effort into it. You care about it. So it's kind of rude, in my opinion, to be like, well, fuck that. Like, even if you don't like the character. So, you know, you do just have to brush that off. They're not necessarily trying to be mean. And you'll get way more people being like, cool costume. Hey, I really love that character. Or like when I'm dressed as Angus from the Adventure Zone being told like, you're a great detective or you're a genius because the character makes me so happy. So you'll have way more of that and it's just kind of fun and you just, I feel like get used to it. Like once you start doing a few cons and the good really outweighs the bad and just reminding yourself of a good interaction when you've had a bad one can be really helpful of just like, it's not always like this.
Right.
Yeah, I think everyone sort of made some of the points that I was thinking of, but I think if I ever was going to cosplay, I would not do it alone. I would be horrified to have some stranger walk up to me and try to interact with me. So I think in that sense, it would not be as horrifying to have a couple of friends. We all kind of came in as the same fandom. I think that would be really fun. I think it would be easier for me to inhabit that character and kind of interact as that character that way. And I definitely, what you just said, like focusing on the good stuff that happens, I hope and I imagine you're probably going to meet 100 fans for every hater. And just really remember that people, when they come to these conventions and they see you, it's exciting to them, it makes it magical for them, and it's like a big part of what makes this such a cool culture. So yeah, you're contributing to that.
Right. Yeah. I do want to touch just really briefly, because we are running out of time, but dealing with some sensory issues in costumes. So you might notice that I am not wearing a wig today. And that is because I could not be bothered to put on a wig and also put on makeup and do this panel for you guys. And this was my #1 priority. It was like, I wanted to do this. And I kind of wanted to just showcase, like, it's okay to not have every single part of a cosplay on. You don't have to, like, if you've got a headache or if you're just not feeling 100%, like I have a helmet, I'm just gonna wear the helmet all day. And that's gonna be great because then I can just put the helmet on and just like all the stimulation is gonna go away. And then I'm not gonna be able to see. But that's okay. I take the good with the bad, you know? But that's just one example of how I kind of deal with things like that. I also have this weird thing where I don't like little stickers, like I just don't like little stickers at all. And I cosplayed from Detroit Become Human a little bit ago where they have those little dots on their heads. And I was like, I am not doing that. I'm not putting that on there. I just don't want to. So I am a proponent of if you don't want to wear it, if you don't think it's comfortable, don't wear it. Like, do not care what anyone says or says that you are missing that part. Just don't wear it. You know?
Well, if you don't like little stickers, then what is this?
That's not little. That's
what is this?
enough.
That's small. That's small. Who does that look like? That looks like you.
That's not little. But yeah, that's just something to keep in mind, you know. Again, you know, if you buy costumes from overseas or you commission, maybe make sure to let them know, like, hey, this is the type of fabric I like. If there's certain fabrics that you have an aversion to, you know, don't feel like if there is a screen accurate fabric and you want to work on a costume that you need to use that specific fabric. Use what's in your budget, use what's most comfortable to you and what you can, you know, wear to a convention all day or to a photo shoot or whatever event you're doing. So I'm always a proponent of you don't want to wear it, then don't wear it. Like, this is supposed to be fun. You're supposed to be you're not supposed to be miserable. I mean, you will be miserable at the end of the day, but you know, alleviating that misery as much as you can so that you are, you know, just being aware of yourself. You're checking in with yourself, making sure that you're number one. Because if no one wants to see you on the floor passed out because you are too hot in a costume, and you will probably cry too because pieces will probably break. So.
Yeah, and just going all of that, just make it accessible for yourself, and also just like do what you're comfortable with. So like if there are like specific fabrics that you know just don't work well with you, like you just don't like the feeling of it, you're allergic to it, that happens. Just don't use that style. It's totally okay. Use like what makes sense for you. And then like I mean like I can quickly speak to the whole like Star Wars side of it, like the whole you know there's the whole screen accurate thing. I can talk about that for years, but I'm not going to. Make it wearable for you. That's what like we always say, like make it wearable for you. No one cares what the inside of your costume is going to look like. So like if you need to like line it with like a fabric that like you prefer, that's totally fine. If you need to like add like extra pads or like put like extra closures like everywhere, that's totally fine. Make it wearable for you, make it accessible for you. Also, don't be afraid to wear your glasses if you have them. Please wear them. Like I'm wearing contacts right now. Like one of my biggest fears is not being able to see. By the end of the day, I'm probably going to take them out and put my glasses on, but that's totally fine. Use what you need in order to do your day-to-day life. That is totally fine.
Yeah. So, you know, I definitely second what you said about the wigs there. You know, lest anybody think that is my real hair. No, it is a wig. Here it is. It exists. But I was not going to wear this for the whole panel. And so, you know, it's an easy on, easy off kind of thing. But for anybody who likes to stim, you know, fidget spinners, whatever, you know, pick your poison, whatever you like, think about incorporating that into your cosplay, because I've got one like right here. I've got this watch chain right here that connects to a certain type of fob watch, and I just like to spin it around in my finger as I walk. I just do one of these little maneuvers. And so, you know, think about that. If you like to stim, think about incorporating little things into your cosplay that you can just do, like a little button flap that maybe you want to open and close. So, you know, think about little things like that.
Yeah, I'm basically gonna second everything. I luckily more have like food texture issues than like touching me thing. Yeah. But one thing for me is I really hate my vision being impaired in any way at all, to the point that I wear contacts instead of glasses because I don't like seeing the glasses flame. So if you see me walking around, this is going to be like tucked behind my ear so it doesn't get in my face. But since I'm sitting still, it's out. It's kind of one other example of that. I went to Rhode Island Comic Con in the sequin suit that's in my picture that was at the beginning. I took the boots off partway through the day and was wearing Converse. I took the wig off at some point and still had people ask for like a photo because they like the suit. So it truly doesn't matter like if you're not as accurate as you would like to be. If you're losing parts during the day because of comfort, you'll still have people that think you look awesome, which I think is really reassuring, because that's always kind of one of my like fears of people being like, it's not like, I don't care because it's not like complete or as good, but truly they don't. So they just think you still look cool. So I think that's always nice to remember.
I'll just say really quick, like, know your sensory profile and plan ahead. So like I knew I was not gonna be able to take the lights all day, so I wore a wide brimmed hat. If you know it's gonna be too loud, finding a costume where you can incorporate headphones, keep some music going, whatever's gonna kind of, whatever you would do to stay calm somewhere else, see if there's a way that you can bring that into what you're doing.
Yeah. And then the final question is, why do you think you've stuck with cosplay as long as you have? For me personally, again, going back to the beginning, cosplay is a million hobbies lumped into one, so that gives me the excuse and the, you know, basically permission to learn all of these hobbies if I want to. You know, I can go to my husband and say, hey, I've been researching 3D printers for the past 3 months, and if I get a 3D printer, I can, you know, it'll pay for itself after I print out 4 helmets. And, you know, I've got 2 3D printers now. He's got a resin printer himself, so he's out there too. But that for me is why I think I've stuck with it. There are so many things you can do, so many different characters, and anytime I'm getting bored with something, like right now I'm bored with 3D printing, I'm sewing right now. So kind of can flip-flop between hobbies. So
I don't know. I think for me, it's just like I've met so many people through cosplay. I can't quit on this hobby, and it's just like to that point, and like it's just one of like the most fun like extracurricular activities that I have in my life. And again, it's always something new to learn, and I love learning those new things.
No, I definitely agree with the social aspect. You know, like I said, I've met some of my closest friends through cosplay. You know, I don't really feel like I need to give this up because I'm getting older and everything, and my knee hurts. Screw it, I'm going to keep doing it.
Yeah, one of my fears when I was 16 was outgrowing the hobby. So seeing people that are older than me continuing in it has always been really inspiring. And yeah, it's just supposed to be fun. And I've met so many great people through it. Some of my closest friends back in Oregon I met because we were cosplaying from the same stuff. And sewing has always been one of my biggest hobbies, so it's a great outlet for that. So I think that's just part of why I've kept with it, the community and the fact that I really like what goes into it.
Just being part of this panel, I've decided I'm probably going to start cosplaying when I come to cons.
Do it.
My game.
Do it.
That's a no-brainer at this point. So I'll be hitting you guys up for some advice.
That's what I like to hear. But yeah, I thank you guys so much for coming out to the panel. I really appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Yeah, if you want to follow any of us, this is all of our stuff up there. Andrew has a game on Kickstarter that he is demoing on the floor.
Correct.
And that Kickstarter has been, what's the word for it?
We just got mentioned as a project we love. We've had our second stretch goal already.
So yeah, thank you all so much for coming out. And hope to see you all on the floor in your great costumes.
Yes, enjoy the rest of your con, and thank
That's
you
it.
all
Yes.
again.
Yes, thank you all.
Enjoy yourselves, guys.
Thank you,
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.